Welcome to the All Hoops Podcast. We are back. I'm your host, Steve Inman. I'm joined by my co-host and producer to the stars, Chris Brito. We're going to talk about the downfall of Team USA in the FIBA World Cup, plus which players do they need to add to make sure this doesn't happen to them again at the Olympics. Before we get to all that, Chris, my friend, how are you?
Hey, Steve. Happy to be back with you doing a new episode of the All Hoops podcast. Um, it hasn't been as crazy of a summer, but with the FIBA tournament, it's gotten a little bit of our basketball fix. Um, I think we have a lot to talk about with Team USA, so let's start there. Team USA lost against Germany in the semifinal a few days ago, and I think it's more a testament of how good the rest of the world has improved in that realm, more so than Team USA losing this. And I think it's a great thing that basketball around the world is improving. Like, you can make the argument that two of the best players in the world aren't American. That's Luka and that's Nikola Jokic. So I think seeing that play out on the world stage, I think is only going to drive more interest as opposed to not.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point. I definitely agree that the rest of the world is catching up. I still think USA is still far above most of these other places. Like you just mentioned, Luka, Joker, right? But like those guys aren't really building teams of like star players the way the US can. They're building a team with quality role players who deeply care about this tournament, surrounded by a star or two, right? So I think the answer is just Team USA just did not bring enough talent to this competition. I feel like they didn't really do a very good job of supporting the talent they did have. I mean, you look at Paolo Banchero, who I believe is going to be a 26, 27 point scorer a game in his heyday in the NBA. And he had 6 points in their last game. He only played 17 minutes. You saw Brandon Ingram really just struggle in this, where he didn't even play in this game
I mean,
against.
he just wasn't very good in the tournament. I
Right.
think.
But like, to me, yes, that's on him, but it's also on Steve Kerr and this coaching staff for not really getting the most out of those guys. Anthony Edwards to me is a guy who's going to be a star in this league, but to me, as you just mentioned, he's not a guy I feel comfortable with one-on-one against Luka. He's not a guy I feel
I
comfortable
mean,
with one-on-one against Shai.
well,
He need more help.
he just he so the team definitely needs more help in the scoring department. I think with Anthony Edwards was by far the best player on that squad this year. And you could probably he was probably also one of the best players, who just like shine in different ways, right? Like I think he's obviously known for his offensive prowess, but he played good defense. I think he by far was the alpha of this group. And with Ingram, I think the problem with Ingram was that he just got way into his head. And I think that if you're not used to deferring on a team, I think that's a problem when you come to when you're on a team that there are other really good players around you, you know?
And
And
I think there's a lot of stars who will be on this team next year in Paris for the actual Olympics who have the same issue as Ingram, where they're not really sharing the ball too much, but they're a lot better at scores than Ingram, right? So you're
yeah,
going to have just more efficiency, and I think that'll just right away help their half court offense. I also thought just the style, you brought this up, and I thought this was a very good point with Halliburton pushing the ball compared to Brunson kind of slowing it down. I think it's really hard to play two different styles like that. And I wonder if they kind of need 2 point guards who can kind of play a similar style next year compared to two kind of different offenses, a starting lineup and then a completely different lineup for the bench.
yeah. I mean, you could also look at it, so you can look at it that way, but you could also look at it you know, kind of like how the bench then becomes its own
Unit.
formidable unit, right? Where it's just a different beast. And I think a lot of the runs that USA had, like when they were like killing teams, were really when Halliburton and the bench unit came on, just because of the way the ball was moving and how fast they were and how good they were defensively. So I guess you're not wrong, I guess, and it's not to say that you're wrong or not. I think you actually do have a point, but I think the variation in style actually may have really helped Team USA in like in this format.
I also think just most American star players, my guess is their thought process on this FIBA World Cup is who cares? They asked Jimmy Butler about it a couple days ago, and he basically said nobody cares about FIBA. Nobody cares about this. And I'm assuming a lot.
I think it well, I know about the Jimmy stuff, but I think he's probably the last person to ask.
Well, I also think you'll have an answer to this depending on who's on this team next year. If this team looks very similar next year that it does now, you could say nobody, like, the opinion wasn't different. But all of a sudden, if this team changes and there's 8 different players who are better than this group, you're going to say nobody cared about FIBA. They only care about the Olympics and the gold medal. And that's how we'll know next year, right? So I think what they really need to do is they need to go get a star center. And I know most of the star centers in the NBA are international guys, but I think a guy like Bam would make a lot of sense here. I think even Embiid, who is, an American citizen who's been in America for basically half his life now, I think he would be a guy who can make a lot of sense for this team. You need a shot blocker, somebody who's going to stop,
But, but with
young
someone like Embiid,
stars in the rim.
but with someone like Embiid who has chronic injuries,
Yeah.
is someone who would be down for this if he has a one
I
championship
think it's
point.
worth pitching. I think it's definitely worth pitching. And like if I'm in Embiid, right, and I've never even been to a finals, give me at least a gold medal on my resume. Like, you got to get something. And I
Like
think it's
Melo, yeah.
you like Carmelo Anthony. I mean, it's definitely something. I almost view it as like kind of like a half a ring, and it's like one that's like a lot easier to obtain. You don't have to go create a super team. There's already one waiting for you. So, and again, especially coming off of this disappointment where they may not even get bronze tomorrow, adding an Embiid or a Bam might create a sense of, wow, we really needed you, instead of this team was too talented, we didn't really even need these guys. So
Yeah.
I think that would be really good for Embiid's rep going forward, just like it could be for a lot of guys who are still looking for that first ring. So I hear what you're saying about this being less about USA and more about how the rest of the world caught up, but I think it's just the USA did not take this seriously. They did not really get the young players ready to go. The veteran star players did not show up, and
Yeah.
you got to be
I
ready
mean,
for next year.
I think like I almost feel like it's not fair to say that
Okay.
just because it's not like we brought in like scrubs. We did bring in players who are, granted, not the A team, but we did bring players who, like, in many cases are the best players on their respective teams. Brunson, Edwards, Halliburton.
I mean, Austin Reeves was one of the better players for Team USA. Is he he's the third best player in LA?
Yeah, but also look who's ahead of him. Like,
Yeah.
a legendary, like,
Like Josh Hart was in the starting lineup. Is he the 5th best Nick?
no, I think Hart was like brought on more on like a situational sort of, but I hear your point.
Right. I mean,
I
yeah,
think
Bobby Portis on this team. Bobby Portis is not even a starting NBA player. Like,
to me the most confusing roster spot is him. Like, I don't like, he didn't play much. Maybe they brought him because he's a veteran, but I
right.
wouldn't have brought a veteran who has never been to the Olympics before. What could he be telling the guys? Oh, hey guys, like, the Slovenia plays like this. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, even if you like, that's a great point in terms of like a vet who's done this before. Even if you brought in like a guy like an Andre Iguodala, who's like really not going to play in this tournament, but can be like, I've done this kind of thing before. I've won NBA championships. I won a gold medal.
Mhm.
I'm not even sure if actually he's won a gold medal, but if he had like a guy like a veteran guy who's not going to really mind if his playing time isn't there,
He has actually.
somebody, yeah, that's the kind of thing I would use for that last spot on the team. Anyway, it is disappointing, but
Mhm.
Chris, let's just say hypothetically, we say, all right, you're in charge of the USA roster for next year in Paris, and no one is going to say no to you. Everyone wants to talk to Mr. Breezy himself. They'll all say yes. What would be your Team USA starting lineup?
All right, I'd probably go Tatum. I'd probably go. I'd probably go Jalen Brown. I also go Devin Booker. I think for point guard, I'd love Brunson, but I think I'd probably go Curry or Dame. And then I think for center, a big burly center. Yeah, you know what? You bring up a good point. Like there just aren't a lot of like star centers like they used to be. Um, I think I probably have to go Bam also.
Yeah, no, I think we both agree on
Like
Bam. I remember Bam was on the team last time, right? In
the
2021.
Olympics. Yeah, he makes
So
perfect sense.
I think he makes perfect sense. He's a guy who can defend the rim. He's a guy who can score if he needs to. But most of the time, if you're going to build a super team like you just didn't, I think your team is fantastic. Your team easily wins the goals, right? You're not going to need a center who's going to need the ball double digit times in the game. You're going to need a guy who's going to do the dirty work. And Bam's willing to do that. He's won one of these before. I think he's the perfect guy. I would probably go a guy like Steph Curry. I think just whenever he's there, they win. I don't think he would do it, but again, we're saying for this exercise, they can't say no.
Uh-huh.
Devin Booker would be my shooting guard. Kevin Durant and LeBron would be must watch TV, obviously. And both of those guys, I think, don't even need to play a full scoring load. You could bring in a guy like Anthony Edwards off the bench, and he could play some of those minutes, and the three of them can kind of share, you know, 25 minutes a game as starting wings. And I mentioned Bam as a center. So I think there's so many combinations you can do that easily wins this thing. And I'm not even ruling out them bringing back the same team next year and them winning it there. I think they just need a little more continuity. As we said, they kind of didn't really know what to do with Paolo. The Ingram thing didn't work. They're obviously, I don't think he's going to be back, but if he is back, I think they'll have a better understanding of how to use him in effective roles. And then the Brunson Halliburton thing, two different paces. I wonder how they can better utilize both of those guys.
Yeah, it's a good point with Halliburton, Hallie, and Brunson. The one thing I wanted to say about um no, it's like I think in my mind I was saying how they're the two best players in international. I wanted to give a quick shout out to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who was probably the best player in this tournament. And that's saying something if Luka and Anthony Edwards are playing. Shea was like killing it, dude. He
He's
led
my
Team
player for the world.
Canada, dude.
Yeah.
Like, granted, they're not going to win the gold either. They're going to be playing the Team USA on Sunday. I, I'm so encouraged by him. He's probably a top 10 player, and you have him on your fantasy team.
I sure do.
Congratulations.
No, I'm very, very happy with Shea, and I think he's the most underrated player in the whole NBA. He's a guy who does not really get the recognition, one, because he's Oklahoma City and they never win, and two, because every time they get to February, they're like, oh, shoot, we're trying to tank and we're 500 because Shea's too good. Shut him down. And they basically done this 3 of the last 4 years,
Yeah.
and so, or 2 of the last 3, whatever it is. But the bottom line is, I think they're going to be a lot better this year, and people are going to be on Shea watch every night, where it's, wait, this is one of the 7 or 8 best players in the entire world, and we need to give him that recognition. So I can't wait for that, especially because I have him on the keeper fantasy team. So, Chris, let's move on. Obviously, a lot to look forward to with the Paris Olympics next year, but back to the NBA. What trade do you think are going to happen first? We've been waiting forever for both of these, James Harden or Damian Lillard. How do you see this playing out? Which one is traded first?
Uh, I think James Harden doesn't get traded. I can't see any team willingly wanting to trade for a player who continuously has shown that he's willing to self-destruct everything around him until he gets what he wants. Like, there's no version of this where I'm looking at James in a positive way, unfortunately. mostly because he obviously is an amazing player, but he's a little bit toward the end of his prime or out of his prime, and he costs a lot of money. The only benefit to getting him on your team is that he's an expiring. That is literally the only benefit. And then someone who could obviously like give you potentially a double double in terms of assists and scoring. Um, I don't know. I can't see him. I can't see any team wanting to like unless the team gets desperate later on in the season. Um, with Dame though, Dame I still have high hopes for. I think he has continuously taken the high road in terms of getting out of Portland. I just wonder when are we going to wait? I think it's going to take for another team to get involved in order for Dame to really go to Miami. Like that's the only way I see it happening.
The Dame situation reminds me a lot of the Donovan Mitchell thing last year, where you just heard, oh, Knicks, 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 Knicks. The Knicks are offering what probably Utah thought was 75 cents on the dollar. We can do better, just waiting for another team. They kept saying no other team's going to emerge. You got to give him to the Knicks. Whole media says he's going to be a Knick. They're circling, the Utah Jazz versus Knicks game at MSG and then Utah. And then all of a sudden, boom, Cleveland's interested. Boom, 2 minutes later, he's a Cleveland Cavalier. I think the same thing is trending towards what's happening. Everyone assumes Lillard's a member of the Heat. They say, oh, well, the Heat want him. You haven't really heard other teams involved. Their
Yeah.
package is okay. Is it good enough? I don't know, but they
Yeah.
probably don't have to because there's another team involved. All of a sudden, some team is going to get involved in the middle of maybe the end of this month,
Yeah.
early next month.
Hmm.
And who knows? I don't know who that could be. There's so many teams that can just say, let's try this. Let's go for it. He's under contract for several years. He's not going to sit out.
He's not, no.
And if we're trading for him, we believe we have a winning team. So
Yeah.
I still think Miami is a pretty good shot here, but I'm starting to now think the field is the favorite compared to the Heat themselves. And then as for Harden, I think you're 100% correct. The attitude to me is more of a concern than declining skills. I think just the idea that I have to trade assets to bring in a guy who's going to be an expiring contract and is not happy to be here, who's already going to step foot in the door and go, okay, I want 150, $200 million. And if you don't give me this, I'm not happy with you, or I'm going to try to get you fired, or I'm not going to try, or I'm going to, put on weight or leave for strip clubs and all the crazy things he's done in the last few years. You brought up before the show, this is trade request number 3 in 3 years with 3 different teams. At some point, as you correctly said, this is not on the teams. This is him. And whether I think he's been a fantastic player. He's a future Hall of Famer. I think there's value in bringing in a player like that who could still play at a high level. But at the same time, I just think the attitude is too much. The skills are declining.
Much. Yeah.
And this is a guy who you really have to change your entire offense around him to make it work. And
Hmm.
to do that this late in the offseason for a guy who you can't really depend on is not something I would do unless it was kind of a throwaway. And
Yeah.
you're not getting a throwaway. Daryl Morey's already made that clear. And if I'm another team, I'm thinking, okay, he waited us all out on Ben Simmons. And that basically destroyed the Nets when they did that. I don't want to be involved in another trade like this.
Yeah. I think in regard to James, the one thing with him is that on top of everything else we just mentioned, even with the skills, he's shown to be a player who can't come up clutch in the moments he had to. Like Philly should have won that series against Boston.
Yes. Right.
They didn't,
I mean, in our lifetimes, I would make the case that he's the superstar who has shown up the least in the playoffs. And now he's older and more malcontent. Why would I want him unless you're telling me he's a throw in a deal or something? Like if I'm the Clippers, I think your attitude is correct. Sure, we'll take him. We'll try something new. It hasn't really worked the way it's working now, but we're not really giving you the multiple first round picks, Terrence Mann, all these young players that you're asking for. We don't even have those things. So we're not really gonna give them up. It just doesn't really make any sense. And I, as a Harden owner in our fantasy league, again, trying to move him, but it's been hard. Hearing the story that he was invited by Silver to be an all-star replacement and was so upset that he wasn't originally on the team that he ignored the commissioner about it. The commissioner just said, "All right, screw it. We'll give it to Pascal Siakam." That's insane. Like,
That's
I'm sure he has like all-star incentives in his contract. He probably cost himself so much money doing that. Plus, like, all-star records like go on your resume for the rest of your life, past your life. And now he just lost one because he was being petty. That's crazy.
He's the petty king. He's the petty king. Anyway, I sort of can't wait for both those trades to like just go through and like we can move on and think. I think this may be me looking into it way too much, but it also doesn't look good for the league to have listen, I know it's a players league, but I don't think it's necessarily a good look for the NBA to have two of the better players of the league hold out or sort of like
I don't see Lillard holding out.
dip.
I
You-
don't see it even getting to camp. I think he'll be gone before then because if they did not have um Scoot on the team, I think they would be like, well, we'll take this to camp if we have to. But I don't think they want Scoot having to deal with that distraction. I think they want him just thinking, I'm the starting point guard here. So I think they're going to get rid of Lillard long before then. But as you said, it's probably not a good look to have once again another holdout, and this one being the same guy, James Harden.
Yeah, no way.
He's 34. Like, it's
Yeah, he's
probably
older than you.
the number still, yes, he is. Just make that clear. I just turned 31, but just to make this clear, Harden is coming off a pretty good year statistically. He led the league in assists, 10.7, 21 points a game, 38% from three. Like, there's the numbers are still there, but it's the attitude. It's having to build your offense around him. You have to give him a giant contract. Defensively, he's not giving you anything. It's really hard to make this work. So we'll have to see how it plays out. I hope we get to see two interesting trades that we're not seeing right now, but hopefully all those things happen and we have something to talk about in the next few weeks. But Chris, let's get to our final thoughts right after this. All right, Chris, final thoughts time here. The last two kind of notable free agents both signed in the last week. Christian Wood went to the Lakers on a 2-year deal, and PJ Washington signed a 3-year deal to stay in Charlotte. I don't think there's much left now. I mean, I went through a couple of different trackers and a couple of notable names still there, but I don't know if any of these guys have anything left in the tank. John Wall, Terrence Ross, Kelly Oubre, Will Barton were really the four that I kind of circled there. Chris, do you see any of these guys finding one more NBA team, or is it the end for all of them?
I mean, I'm of the belief that like I think once you get to this point, like yeah. I mean, Blake Griffin maybe.
He hasn't looked like he could do
Yeah.
anything offensively in a couple of years now, so I don't know.
TJ Warren. I mean, isn't TJ Warren signed?
Still there. I don't. You're right. He was the other one I was going to write down. I just wasn't sure how healthy he was, but he's a guy who he could probably get a training camp invite somewhere.
Yeah, it's tough, dude. I mean, I don't like any. I mean, Michael Carter Williams maybe.
Really?
Yeah, DJ Augustine. He's 36. Man, no, listen, I think you're right. I think for the most part, like a lot of the players that deserve to be on teams are on teams. And I think there's nobody from that pool where like I would rather get one of those compared to just like promote one of my G League guys, you know?
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say. Injuries are going to happen. They happen every year. They're going to happen in training camp. They're going to happen in the preseason. There's going to be more need for more bodies. And if I'm a team, I would much rather go with one of the top 5 scoring G League guys than to give John Wall his 4th chance, or Terrence Ross, who couldn't really get into the Suns rotation last year, another chance. And if you watch that G League documentary that the Ringer put up on Amazon, Gabe York, there's a ton of guys like a Gabe York who are just hungry, determined, motivated, and really just the only reason they haven't gotten a chance is because of something years ago, whether it's, oh, you're too small, or oh, you're a tweener between a point guard and a shooting guard, or oh, now you're too old. Like, I'd rather give one of those guys a chance. And I every time you hear one of those stories, usually they're players of the Miami Heat, of course, but every time you hear one of those stories, the guy makes it through and motivates the other guys to be more and to be hungrier and determined. And you saw a couple of guys like that in Strus and Vincent, who both got huge minutes in the playoffs, helped the Heat get to the finals, and then got giant deals. And now the Heat are gonna replace both of them with probably 2 G League guys a year from now that we've never heard of.
Yeah. And I think that's the greatness really of the Miami Heat. But yeah, I mean, I think we're probably at the point of the summertime where it's just like whoever's on an NBA roster probably just deserves to be there at this point, you know. But there's training camp coming up, and like a lot of these guys like make another chance there. Like, so we'll see.
Yeah. All right, Chris, you have anything else before we wrap up the show?
No, I'm excited for the season to finally begin. Training camp is in a few weeks. We'll give breakdowns of the Western and Eastern Conference, and then our expectations for our New York Knicks.
Absolutely. Can't wait for all those things. If you have a question, a topic you want us to discuss, put it on the comments when we put this on social media. We're happy to go through any of those things, especially this time of the year. We're always looking for content. So that's going to do it for us here on the All Hoops podcast. Thanks to Chris. Thank you to our watchers on YouTube. Thank you to our listeners on Apple and Spotify. We'll be back very soon to talk about more NBA action.
Bye, everyone.